Hi, my name is Owen Soller, and for my ICS Summative, I will be doing a Simon game. So what exactly is a Simon game? Well, basically, it is a game that tests the user's ability to memorize a sequence of colors. The game contains four colors, such as red, blue, orange, and green, and will flash them randomly in a pattern. The user must correctly input that same pattern, and if they do so, they get a point. Each round, the length of the pattern will increase by one until the user can no longer remember and inevitably clicks the wrong color, and that is where the game would end. So, for my flowchart, I've done a few different flowcharts just so I can demonstrate each of the processes with more detail and make it more organized. And so to first understand the flowcharts, there are a few variables which you should know. The first variable is called flashed, and this basically represents which color is being to be clicked or and which one will flash. And I'll get to that later. We also have two variables called dark and time. And these are basically used to keep track of time, as a game uses a J timer to basically have a frame rate and make it so the game runs well with time. The next variable is index pattern, and this variable basically tracks which number you are at in the sequence. So it would begin at 0, but if you say in a sequence of 4, you get the first one right, then it will become 1, etc., all the way up to 4. The next variable is pattern, and this will be the list that holds all the colors and the order. And we also have a Boolean variable called creating pattern. And if this is true, the game will be in the displaying a pattern mode. And if it's false, then it will be in the guesser mode. So here's my first flowchart, and this is what happens when you first press the mouse. So the game will first check if it is in a creating pattern and if the game is not over. If it's not creating pattern, and if this is true, then the game will basically want to find out where you click your mouse. So if you press the mouse in the top left, it will basically flash the color red as, or flash the color green as green is flashed is when flash is equal to 1. And this is basically for all colors. And ticks will be always set to 1, and this is important to keep track of time. Here's my next flowchart, and this is basically the algorithm for how the whole game works. And so as well, when you click your mouse, the game will first see if ticks has no remainder when divided by 20, or when it's set to a remainder of 20. And this variable can be changed, and so if it gets lower, then that means it will take longer for each action to go through. It's basically to keep track of time. And so if that's true, the color is basically set to the darkened mode, and then obviously if it's not dark, it will basically make it darker. Now here, the game wants to check if the game is creating a pattern. And so if this is true, and if the game is uh if the color was darkened, then it will basically also check if the index pattern is greater than the pattern length. And so if this is true, then it will flash the pattern. However, if it is not true, a new pattern will be made, and this will be shown here. And then at the end, dark is set back to 2, and so this can all happen again. Now I have this other flowchart which basically checks when the game should end. And so flashed is not 0, which is a common occurrence, uh, then the pattern, and this is like when you click a shape or a color, the color would be basically added to the list and then the next index, and this can repeat. However, if flash is 0, then and get then the game uh or sorry. So then if flash is 0, then nothing happens. However, if it gets to this point and if the pattern index is not equal to flashed, i.e. you get the wrong color, then game over is true and the game should end. And that's basically how it works. Now, when the game ends, I've created an end screen to basically prompt the user of their score and tell them they can play again if they want. And so if creating pattern is false, and if game over is true, then the ending text is displayed, and there's also an option to play again. If you do so, the game is restarted, and if you don't, the game ends. However, if game over is not true, it is false, then the score will be displayed up in the corner, and it will also display this right here, the 0 out of 1. This is basically showing what number you are at in the sequence. Now this is basically how the graphics basically implement setting the colors, and so it kind of works like this. If flashed is 1, then and it's true, then it sets the color to green. However, if flashed is not 1, then it sets it to dark green. And this basically goes through all the colors to see if the color should be darkened or light. It's pretty simple. So now here's my pseudocode. I'm not going to go through it because it's pretty simple, and it's kind of just the code written in English, but the link is here. Okay, so for skills used. So the first skill that I use in my program is obviously an if statement. And this is basically used in almost every part of the code. And it is able to check what color is pressed, what number of the sequence you are on, and if the game is creating a pattern, accepting a pattern, or if the game is over. And you can see here how it's used a lot. I also have action listeners and mouse input. And this basically allows the program to run methods based on a mouse input. For example, the program detects what color you pressed and flashes it, as well as it adds that color to a list and more. And you can see here how this all works. If like X is in these certain conditions, so the top left, then this would go through. My next skill would be arrays or lists, and this is used to create a pattern and then check if the inputted pattern is equal to that pattern. And so if the pattern at a certain point is not equal to the color pressed, the game will end. And lastly, JFrames and graphics 2D. And so I use JFrame to create the frame and render the graphics using a render class. However, I also use another import called graphics 2D, and this is used to basically draw all the shapes, such as the squares you click, the text, the score counter, as well as create colors. And you can see here how it basically works by doing g.setColor, g.setStroke, g.drawOval, etc. That's just how it works. So now the code. So this is located in an attached zip file. However, I'll demonstrate it at the very end of the presentation. So for my reflection, in terms of strengths, I would say my main strengths for this project were actually time management. This time I managed to finish my project a week in advance, as well I was able to create my presentation and flowcharts around the same time, whereas during the last project, I kind of finished right on the due date. I'd also say I excelled at graphic design. Using Graphics 2D, I found it very easy to create shapes as well as add text and a score counter. I'd say my greatest weakness involved the coding aspect of the game and coming up with a feasible idea. My original idea was in fact a salmon game, however, I was unable to get it to work. And this was because I was unsure how the game would work and tried to use multiple for loops and double arrays. And so after trying to make a 2D retro football game where you could control the character, and then I also tried making the character and user input, it went smoothly. However, I was stuck when trying to create collisions and the background. And this was mostly caused to my lack of knowledge involving objects, classes, and superclasses. Now, what did I learn? Well, during the course of this project, I learned how to use mouse input and detect what position the mouse was on the screen. This is a very important skill for programs, as it's neat to detect where the screen was clicked. I also learned about something called threads. Threads act as an in-game timer and constantly update the game at a given frame rate or tick time. And lastly, I learned how to work with Graphics 2D implementation. The standard JFrame imports can be very time consuming and long to make. Using this new system allowed me to create shapes, colors, and visuals with ease. So thank you for listening, and now I'll display my code. So right here is my code. At the top, I initialize the variables. Here is a constructor which is used to render the frame, and because my class is called Simon, and so this is just the same. Here is where the starting variables are declared, and every time the program is started, these will just start. I also have a action. This is basically what happens when you click. This is the main algorithm for the code. This is what happens, or this is how the code paints the graphics. It uses also some if statements to tell if the color is dark or light right here, as well as creating the shapes. This code checks if the game is over. And lastly, this code right here tracks your mouse position. So now I'll run it. So here you'll be prompted with a color, and so it flashed blue, and so that's 1 point. Now the next, it flashed blue and green, and so I gotta remember that. So blue, green. It will keep going until you can no longer forget. So I'll maybe go up to 5. Blue, green, green, blue. And keep in mind, this pattern is completely random. So even though it is repeating a bunch, it is it is completely random. And so, oh no, I couldn't remember. And so my score was 5. It tells you that you lose, and you have the option to play again, and it reruns. So yeah, thank you for listening.